So here we are with another ReZero episode. And yeah, a lot of stuff happened. It seems like every episode I talk about how it might be the best one yet. But honestly, I was a little bit let down by this episode. Now, it definitely wasn't bad, but when every episode sets the bar so high, when I feel like something doesn't quite reach it, well, there's a bit of disappointment. So let's go through this and I'll explain why I feel the way I do. So the episode leads off with Subaru trying to run from Satellia, Garfield carrying him and all that. And when they're up against the wall and have no way of getting out, a bunch of the lollies of Rizu-san show up to try helping and charge into Satellia and are basically torn apart. And then Garfield's torn apart. And then things got weird. There's this picture in the episode of Subaru looking up at Satellia covered by all the shadows, and it's really haunting and cool and weird. And then Subaru is swallowed by the shadows. But before that, Satellia keeps going on with, I love you, I love you, I love you, etc., etc., etc. And Subaru takes the time to just make some interesting comments, how he felt about his first I love you in this world when it was told to him by Ram, and how much it encouraged him, and how he basically has no room for his heart for Satellia. It felt kind of interesting, seeing Subaru's mindset, but also sort of felt out of place considering the intensity of what was going on. Him taking the time to monologue just doesn't seem right. I feel like that might be some sort of carryover from the web novel when it's told in first person, so it would make sense to get his thoughts on everything. But still, it did feel kind of weird. And then he was taken in by the shadow, and I love the visual effect here. How we saw his memories, and as we learned later on, all the other characters' memories of what was going on, and they're overlaid on top of each other, and it was very cool. I like it when shows can do something unique with the visuals, and this is, very unique. It's kind of hard to make out what was going on at times, but I think that's fine. It's not that way for the entire show, just a minute or so, so being weird and hard to follow can be very good. We also got Subaru breaking out of it because of his scarf, which he had kind of given to Ekidono when they were in her tea party place. I don't really know how that works, but basically he's able to use the scarf as a knife and stab himself in the throat. Again, I'm confused about how exactly. Maybe they'll explain that later on, or maybe that's just something they kind of rushed through. But Satellia was shocked by this, even crying. And we learned that, or at least I think we learned, if I'm understanding right, that it was Emilia's body. And so, yeah, he was told that he was loved by the girl that he loves' body, even though it wasn't her, but it seemed like Satellia had taken over her body. The question is obviously, how did that happen? Why did that happen? Yeah, definitely a very big question here. Lots of questions. But what I found really interesting is that when Subaru woke up again after dying, he was back with Emilia in the graveyard. Or, not graveyard. Is that cemetery? Yeah, cemetery, that's the word. And he was shaking seeing Emilia, being terrified of her because, he was just killed by her, kind of. And it's also interesting how Emilia reacts. Typically, when Subaru wakes up here, Emilia has just been really shaken by the trial she went through. But not this time, because instead of focusing on herself and what she went through, she sees Subaru in pain, so wants to comfort him, wants to help him, and that gives her emotional stability. Really interesting how Emilia works. She is very selfless, caring about others, and in a way I feel like she uses that as a defense so she does not have to think about herself. And yeah, that was really cool. Then we got some witty dialogue with Ram, sarcastic comments, and all that. And yeah, not too much there. I'm kind of going to skip through a couple things because, other stuff I want to focus on. But yeah, Subaru is able to take all the memories that he had when he was merged in the shadows with everyone else Satellia had absorbed, and basically able to use that knowledge to explore the sanctuary and find the original Rizu, who is hidden in a place. I don't know if we really found out what that place was, but then we learned a lot more about Rizu and all the copies. That they are in fact supposed to be clones of Ekidono who created this place. And that basically they were meant to all be heard, when one body dies, the soul could transition to the other. It didn't quite work, but now we have a bunch of Rizu clones around. And we also learned that Subaru had passed the trial, and therefore he has the ability to command Rizu and the clones. But so does Garfield. We learn a lot of vague things about Garfield in this episode. Though, again, we'll get into that a bit more later on. But then we get a really nice scene between Subaru and Emilia. Again, I said that there's a lot going on in this episode, and I do like the scene between Subaru and Emilia. It's just like very calm, and yeah, that was great. Subaru even talks about how amazing Emilia is, and it just shows the bond between them. It gave Emilia some focus since, well, we haven't seen that much of her since episode 5. Like, she's been there, but hasn't been the focus with all the other crazy things going on. But going back to the scene with ReZero, I think that is a case of, like, there's so much going on in this episode and so much in the series that when they introduce even more concepts and ideas, like, it feels like a bit much. This whole season has been very jam-packed with plot. And while it's not bad that it has been so jammed in going through all the things, it feels like it's right on the border of being too much. And I think that this episode might have crossed the line because, like, I care a lot about the events going on with, like, Subaru and Emilia and what's going on with Satellia and Ekidona and the Great Rabbit and trying to find out a way to help Rem and Mysteries with Roswell and Otto being best boy. That when they add the ReZero part on top of it, like, I feel I'm at my limit of how much I can care. So they do that, and I'm like, okay, I don't really want that. I want to get all these other things, especially since it seemed to be hinting that we would learn more about Beatrice and whatever is going on there, but then we get, like, getting distracted. And again, after the great scene with Emilia, we get Garfield intercepting Subaru on his way out of the sanctuary, and basically Garfield stops him and says he's going to do something evil. He smells like the witch. And then we get a couple vague lines that are hinting at stuff, though it's not really clear what exactly it's hinting at. And it turns out that Garfield attacks Subaru for what he's saying, and then Subaru says something to Garfield. But we don't know what that is, and that basically reveals that it was a test to see how he would react, and then Garfield kind of is okay with him. It's not really clear. Though we do learn that Garfield's hiding something, though what is not said again. And Subaru is saying something, but us not hearing it really is annoying. It's one of my, like, pet peeves when watching anime is I love a good suspense show where I don't know stuff, where it's slowly revealed over time, but a lot of the stuff is hidden. And ReZero does a fantastic job of doing that, but it's done naturally. Like, we follow Subaru. There's a lot he doesn't know about the world, a lot of character motivations, stuff going on. We don't know that because Subaru doesn't know that. But in this case, what Subaru said is something that he does know. So, based off that logic, wouldn't it make sense for us, the viewer, to know it as well? By hiding that information, it feels like the show is being cheap, trying to force more suspense into the plot when it doesn't have to. It doesn't make sense for the story to conceal that. Now, maybe it'll make sense to be more justified later on, but it definitely feels bad in this moment. And if they wanted to conceal that information, there are more natural ways they could have done it. Like, ReZero is such a good suspense show. It doesn't need to force more suspense here. And yeah, we got some other interesting parts where Garfield's saying, "Oh, Subaru, you don't know what true suffering is." Well, Subaru responds, "Yes, I know it, and I'm going to make sure that I take all the suffering and that no one else will face it." Then Subaru went back to the mansion. There's a cute scene between him and Petra's adorable, and Petra's the best lolly. And yeah, so we got that. And then Subaru finally made his way to Beatrice, who says, like, "Welcome back." Or no, she says, "You're finally here, I suppose." So yeah, Beatrice was expecting him. Is that because him coming here is in her gospel? Does her gospel change depending on Subaru's actions? Like the first time through, when he came back here, Beatrice wasn't really expecting him and had a much different reaction than she does here. So yeah, does she know about all the other deaths that Subaru has gone through, all the other time loops? Lots of questions here, and I hope we get answers. Though Beatrice also says some interesting things, that this is the end of a contract that lasted a long, long time. So with who? Roswell? It doesn't feel like 400 years is a long, long time for a spirit. A long time, yes, but not a long, long time, if that makes sense. And this contract is ending by bringing an end to the end of the end. What does that mean? Like, okay, so we're bringing an end to something. What are we bringing an end to? The end of the end. So if you're bringing an end to the end of the end, you're basically ending the end of the end, which means that you're stopping the end from ending by bringing an end to that ending. So that means we're going to continue the end, whatever that means. Hopefully that made sense. It didn't to me. So yeah, and Beatrice also says she will truly be set free this time. From what? The library? Roswell? The world? Something involving the witches? Though she is disappointed and finds it ironic that it is Subaru who is making it possible. So again, lots of questions. And I feel like a lot of questions here is another kind of one of my issues. The thing that makes ReZero great with all of its suspense, going back to it, is a lot of questions, a lot of answers we slowly get. But this episode felt like it just was throwing 500 questions at us without any answers. Which when we're this far into the arc, like 10 episodes in, I think. I don't know what episode we're on. But it feels like at this point we should start be getting more answers than questions, or at least not just a ton more questions. It feels like they're stringing us along saying, oh, you'll get your answers eventually, but pause here, have a lot more questions first. So yeah, a little bit disappointing this episode, I will admit. Not bad, a lot of good, interesting parts, but not my favorite. Hopefully I'll like the rest of the episodes more and it'll go back to being an amazing show, which it still is, honestly. One kind of not really bad episode does not destroy the entire show. So yes, thank you for watching. Let me know what you thought. Do you agree or disagree with me on it? I'm really curious. And yeah, I will be back next week to talk more about ReZero and try to make sense of all the insanity. This show is very insane.